In the quiet corners of the world, some stories echo long after they end. This is one such story, a tale of a tiny kitten shivering in a cold alley, unseen by the rushing world. He was a shadow in the making, a wisp of grey and black fur huddled against concrete, his name whispered only by the wind. His days were measured in hunger, his nights in chill. Hope was a language he had not yet learned, but fate had written a different chapter. On a starless night, gentle footsteps approached, and two worlds were about to collide. The eyes belonged to a girl. She was 15, standing on the threshold between innocence and the world's complexities. Ilara saw what others missed, a stray kitten, trembling and alone. She offered her hand, not to grab, but to comfort. The kitten, hesitant, leaned into her touch, surrendering to kindness. In her arms, he found warmth and safety, a promise of home. From that first night, a bond was forged, silent and unbreakable. She named him Shadow, for he followed her every footstep, a devoted silhouette in her world. No longer the frightened creature from the alley, he became her safe place, her confidant, her comfort. She had saved his life, and in return he gave her his heart, completely and without reservation. That first night was a universe of new sensations. The world he'd known was cold and harsh, but Ilara's home was soft, warm, and safe. The fireplace's warmth chased away the chill in his bones. Ilara watched him with hope and care, offering a bowl of milk. The taste was a revelation, nourishment without fear. That night, curled on her chest, he knew he was home, safe, hers. Building trust was a slow, careful dance. Ilara never pushed, never forced. She spoke in gentle gestures and quiet reassurance, teaching him that her presence meant safety and comfort. Even when storms brought old fears, she was there, calm, patient, a beacon in the dark. In time he learned to trust, and together they spoke a silent language of love. She named him Shadow, the perfect name for her constant companion. He followed her everywhere, a silent presence in every room. Shadow was content to live in her light, his life mapped by her habits. He grew from a trembling kitten into a sleek, confident cat. He was the living embodiment of her kindness, a constant, loving presence. He was her shadow, but also her light, a steady flame of devotion. As Ilara grew up, Shadow became more than a pet. He was her confidant, her silent keeper of secrets. Through late-night study sessions, heartbreak and dreams, he was always there. In her most vulnerable moments, Shadow was her safe place. He was her little shadow, her keeper of secrets, always by her side. While Ilara's world was vast and full of friends, school and dreams for the future, Shadow's world was beautifully small. His universe began and ended with her. She was his sun, his moon, and all the stars in his sky. While she dreamed of a future far away, his only dream was to wake up in her world every day. The change began subtly, but to Shadow it was a seismic shift. Cardboard boxes appeared, multiplying in the hallway, disrupting his world. Ilara moved with new purpose, packing away her life and his. Shadow watched, confused, exploring the boxes, trying to make sense of it all. The house grew emptier. the warmth fading, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. It was the beginning of the end. Amidst the chaos of packing, Ilara finally noticed Shadow watching her, worried and silent. She gathered him into her arms, feeling his purr, a plea and a promise. Tears fell as she whispered, "I have to go, but I'll come back for you, I promise." Shadow believed her. He would wait, holding on to hope as his world changed. The last morning arrived, sunlight exposing the emptiness of the house. Ilara found Shadow by the front door, his eyes pleading for things to stay the same. She knelt, stroking his fur one final time, her touch lingering with silent goodbye. Her mother called gently, "Ilara, we have to go now, he'll be fine. The neighbours will look out for him." Ilara pressed her face to Shadow's fur, whispering, "I love you. Don't forget me." She walked to the car without looking back, leaving Shadow trembling in the doorway. The house was hollow, but Shadow's grief was full and real. The car engine roared, shattering the morning's quiet. Shadow watched the car disappear, unable to move, hope draining with every second. The front door clicked shut behind him, a final, echoing sound. He waited, listening for her return, but only the wind answered. The house was just a shell now, and he was left outside alone. Still, he waited for the door to open again. The first day crawled by, every sound a false hope. Shadow ignored the food left by Ilara's mother, hunger for her stronger than any meal. Night fell, cold and unfamiliar, as he curled on the doormat, pressed to the door. He replayed her promise. "I'll be back soon." The word soon became his anchor. He did not sleep, keeping vigil through the darkness. Shadow waited, no matter how long it would take. Autumn faded, and winter arrived with biting cold and silent snow. Shadow's world shrank to the porch, his fur thickening but never warm enough. Memories of warmth with Ilara haunted him as he watched the empty windows. The world hurried by, blind to the small grey cat enduring the cold. For Shadow, winter was a test of devotion, not a season. He waited, determined to be there when she returned. Seasons turned, spring's hope, summer's heat, autumn's melancholy, winter's chill. Shadow's vigil never wavered, his world reduced to the porch and the door. He watched life go on around him, unchanged in his devotion. Time marked his body, but not his spirit. He became a fixture as constant as the old oak tree. The world moved on, but Shadow's hope remained evergreen. He was a monument to waiting, a silent promise kept. Years passed, and Shadow became a legend, a ghost cat haunting the porch. The house aged, the garden wild, but Shadow remained. Children whispered about the cat who never left. His fur silvered, his movement slowed, but his purpose endured. Every car reignited hope, every day was another vigil. The world saw a fading Shadow, but inside he was still waiting for Ilara. Shadow, the silent sentinel, kept his promise on the doorstep. While Ilara's mother had at first left food, her visits became less frequent over time, eventually stopping altogether. The house was sold to a landlord who lived far away and never visited, leaving it empty and silent. For a while, Shadow's survival was, well, pretty precarious. But the neighbourhood that had watched him for so long began to intervene. His silent, unwavering vigil had touched a chord in the hearts of those who passed by him every single day. They could not understand the depth of his loyalty, but they could see his need. And so, quietly, without any fanfare, they began to care for him. It started with a young boy who lived just a few houses down. He noticed that the cat's food bowl was always empty. With a child's simple, direct compassion, he started saving a portion of his own allowance to buy cat food. Every afternoon after school, he would walk to the empty house and carefully fill the bowl, whispering a soft, "Here you go, kitty," before running off to play. He never tried to pet Shadow, sensing the invisible barrier the cat kept around himself. It was a simple act of kindness, a small gesture that meant the difference between starvation and survival. Soon others followed the boy's lead. An elderly woman who tended her garden across the street began to leave a fresh bowl of water every morning, especially during the hot summer months. A young couple who jogged past the house each evening would sometimes leave a small pouch of wet food, a special treat. They became his silent caretakers, a loose network of strangers united by their shared concern for the lonely cat. They respected his solitude, his fierce dedication to his spot. They didn't try to adopt him or lure him away. They simply supported his vigil. Shadow accepted their offerings with a detached gratitude. He would wait until they were gone before approaching the food, his ingrained wariness of strangers still intact. He was grateful for the sustenance, for the nourishment that allowed him to continue his wait. But the food did not fill the gaping hole in his heart. It was a means to an end. It gave him the strength to see another sunrise, to watch another car turn the corner, to hold on for another day. He was fed by the kindness of strangers, but he was sustained by the memory of a love that felt a lifetime away. One crisp autumn afternoon, a car pulled up next door, and a young woman stepped out. She moved with a grace that jolted Shadow's aging heart. She looked just like Ilara. Hope surged as he ran to greet her, but as he drew close, the scent was wrong. It wasn't her. Defeated, Shadow turned back, each step heavy with disappointment, and collapsed onto his doormat, heart aching from hope lost. The incident with the girl who looked like Ilara left a permanent mark on Shadow. It was as if the last embers of his youthful energy had been spent on that single desperate run, leaving only the slow-burning wick of his devotion behind. He began to move even more slowly, his body a frail vessel carrying the immense weight of his long wait. The portrait of the vibrant young cat he had once been was fading, the colours growing dull, the lines blurring with the passage of time. He was becoming a pale, washed-out version of himself, a living photograph slowly losing its image. His world, already small, shrank even further. He rarely left the porch now, even to explore the yard. The journey to the food bowl at the bottom of the steps became a significant effort. His senses, once so sharp, began to dull. His hearing, which could once pick out the specific sound of Ilara's family car from a block away, now only registered the general rumble of passing traffic. His eyesight grew cloudy, the world taking on a softer, less defined edge. The faces of the kind strangers who fed him became blurry shapes of light and shadow. He spent most of his days sleeping, his body conserving what little energy it had left. But his sleep was not peaceful. It was filled with dreams, vivid and potent flashes from his past. He dreamed of being a tiny kitten cradled in Ilara's warm hands. He dreamed of chasing a red string across the living room floor, her laughter echoing around him. He dreamed of curling up on her chest, the steady rhythm of her heartbeat a comforting lullaby. He would sometimes twitch in his sleep, his paws kneading the rough doormat as if it were a soft blanket from long ago. He would wake from these dreams with a sense of profound disorientation, the warm, joyful feelings of the past colliding with the cold, lonely reality of the present. The contrast was a fresh wound every time. He would lift his head, his cloudy eyes scanning the familiar, empty street, and the deep ache of her absence would settle over him once more. He was living more in his memories than in the present moment. The past was his only sanctuary, the only place where she was still with him, where the promise had not yet been broken by the silent, relentless march of the years. Despite the toll of years and the weight of loneliness, one thing within Shadow remained untouched: his hope. It was no longer bright, but deep and resilient, weathered by countless lonely nights. She had said she would be back. For him, that was the only truth that mattered. He was not waiting for death, he was waiting for love. And so he waited. As evening fell, the light in Shadow's world faded, both outside and within him. Years weighed heavy on his frail frame, his movements slow and deliberate. His once glossy fur had thinned, silver spreading through his coat, yet even as his body weakened, his spirit endured. The promise she made still burned within him, a fading light, but one that refused to be extinguished. The neighbours saw Shadow grow frail, his ribs showing, his legs trembling. They offered food, a warm bed, gentle words, acts of kindness he could not accept. He stayed on his rough doormat, loyal to the spot where she left him, waiting for her return. Their kindness warmed his body, but his heart remained with the memory of a girl and her promise. As the outside world grew dimmer and more distant, Shadow's inner world became more vivid, more real. His mind was a fortress built of memories, and he retreated within its walls more and more often. The present was a place of aches and loneliness, a grey and blurry landscape of waiting. But the past was a sunlit kingdom, filled with warmth, laughter and love. He would close his cloudy eyes, and he was no longer an old, frail cat on a cold porch. He was a kitten again, small and vital, nestled securely in the crook of Ilara's arm as she read a book. He could feel the phantom sensation of her fingers stroking his fur, a gentle rhythmic motion that always made him purr. He could hear the echo of her voice, not the whispered promise of her goodbye, but the happy, youthful sound of her calling his name from another room. These sensory memories were more potent than the reality around him. He could almost smell the scent of her shampoo, a faint floral fragrance that meant safety and home. He lived in these moments, replaying them over and over, each one a precious jewel he turned over in his mind. The fortress of his memory was his only shelter from the harsh reality of his existence. In this inner world, time had no power. In here, she never packed her bags. The cardboard boxes never appeared. The front door never clicked shut behind him. In his mind, she was always just about to walk through the door, home from school, her face lighting up when she saw him waiting. This mental sanctuary was what kept him going. It was the fuel for the stubborn fire of his hope. A constant reminder of what he was waiting for, of why his vigil mattered so much. The neighbours saw him sleeping, his body curled tightly against the cold. They saw a creature succumbing to age and weariness. They couldn't see the vibrant life that was playing out behind his closed eyelids. They couldn't know that in his dreams he was not alone. He was with his girl, in the warm, sunlit rooms of a house that was still a home. He was chasing a dancing reflection on the wall, pouncing on her wiggling toes under a blanket, and purring his heart out on her chest. His body was fading, but his memories were a brilliant, burning light. In the quiet afternoon, the elderly cat would sometimes hear a voice, her voice, echoing through his memory. It was so vivid he'd lift his head, searching the empty room with hope. But the sound would fade, leaving only silence and longing. Still, he listened, holding on to the echoes, proof of love and memory. There came a day when Shadow could no longer make it down the porch steps. His hind legs, weakened by age and arthritis, simply refused to support him on the descent. He tried, his body trembling with the effort, but his legs buckled and he slid back to the top landing. He had become a prisoner on his own small island. The world, which had already shrunk to the confines of the yard, now contracted even further to the few square feet of the wooden porch. His vigil, once overlooking the street, was now confined to this elevated, isolated platform. The kind strangers adapted. The boy who had first fed him, now a young teenager, would carefully climb the steps each day to place the food and water within his reach. He no longer saw the boy's face clearly, only a tall, kind shape that brought him the sustenance he needed to continue. He accepted this new reality with a quiet resignation. His world was shrinking, but his purpose remained vast. He could still see the street, still watch the cars, still keep his watch. That was all that mattered. The physical limitations were secondary to the mission of his heart. He began a slow, deliberate retreat towards the door. Each day he seemed to curl up a little closer to the unyielding wood, as if trying to merge with it, to become a part of the house itself. He pressed his frail body against the doorframe, seeking a phantom warmth, a residual memory of the life that pulsed within those walls so long ago. He was drawing all of his energy inward, conserving every last flicker of his life force for the single purpose of waiting. The outside world, with its sounds and movements, became less and less important. His focus narrowed to a single point, the door. This retreat was a physical manifestation of what was happening inside him. He was withdrawing from the world of the living and receding into his own world of memory and hope. He was a ship pulling up its anchor and preparing for a final journey, not across the sea, but into the deep, quiet harbour of his own soul. He was gathering himself, preparing for the last stage of his vigil. The light was fading faster now, and he knew with a deep animal instinct that his time was running out. He had to be ready. He had to be in his place. As the last traces of autumn gave way to the first sharp bite of winter, a profound change settled over Shadow. The restless energy, the hopeful jolts at every passing car began to subside. A deep, heavy calm took its place. He no longer scanned the street with the same frantic intensity. Instead, his gaze became softer, more distant, as if he were looking through the world, past the houses and the trees, to a place only he could see. It was an acceptance not of defeat, but of fate. The final chapter of his long wait had begun, and he seemed to understand it. He stopped moving almost entirely, save for the slow, shallow rise and fall of his chest. He would lie curled in a tight ball, his nose tucked under his tail, a perfect circle of fading life. The spot he had chosen was directly in the centre of the doormat, the very mat where she would have wiped her feet before coming inside. It was the most sacred spot on his small, lonely island, and he claimed it for his final watch. He was no longer just waiting for her to come home. He was preparing a space for his own departure, a place where his spirit could finally rest. The world seemed to acknowledge the solemnity of the moment. The neighbourhood grew quieter around him, or perhaps he just no longer heard it. The sky above was a vast, indifferent canvas of grey, the clouds heavy with the promise of snow. He was entering a state of grace, a peaceful transition from a life of relentless hope to one of quiet surrender. He had done all he could. He had kept his promise. He had waited. Now all that was left was to let the fading light go, and to see what, if anything, lay in the darkness beyond. He closed his clouded eyes, not just to sleep, but to retreat completely into the fortress of his memory. He no longer needed to see the outside world. The only world that mattered now was the one he carried inside him. He curled himself tighter, a final, futile attempt to find warmth in the biting wind. The final vigil had begun. He was no longer waiting for a car to turn down the street. He was waiting for a single familiar face to appear in the twilight of his mind, to guide him on the last part of his journey home. The day began not with a sunrise, but with a slow, reluctant lightening of the sky. For Shadow there was no difference. His world was already twilight. He drifted, conserving his last energy, holding on to the memory of her warmth. As the sun finally broke through the clouds, a gentle light fell across his resting form, a final warm farewell. Night settled, and all was quiet. In the gathering darkness, the fortress of his memory opened one last time. He was a kitten again, safe in the sunlit bedroom, wrapped in the boundless love of his girl. She dangled a red yarn above his head, her laughter echoing, her smile warm as sunlight. He chose this memory, her smiling face, the joy, the love. It was the perfect moment in which to rest forever. As the memory of her laughter faded, the night deepened around him. The first stars appeared in the cold sky, and a gentle wind whispered through the trees. He heard her voice, soft as a silver bell. "I love you, Shadow." Peace washed over him. He was not alone anymore. Her love was a lantern in the darkness, guiding him home. His breathing, which had been so shallow, grew even slower, each breath a long, gentle release. It was not a struggle, it was a surrender. It was the final letting go of a life defined by holding on. He had held on through a dozen winters. He had held on through sickness and pain. He had held on to a promise long after the world had forgotten it. Now he was finally letting go, not in defeat, but in triumph. His duty was done, his vigil was over. He had waited until the very end, and she had come. His purpose was fulfilled. One final image bloomed in the darkness behind his eyes. It was her face, not the face of the 15-year-old girl, but her face as it was now, a woman's face, softened by time and filled with a deep, sorrowful love. It was a vision, a final gift. He saw her smile, and in that smile he saw an apology, a thank you, and a promise of a reunion in a place where there were no goodbyes. It was a look of pure, unconditional love, the same love that had saved him from the alley so long ago. It was the first face he had truly known, and it was the last face he would see. With that final, beautiful image held gently in his mind, he took his last breath. It was not a gasp or a shudder. It was a soft, quiet sigh, like a sleeper settling into a deep and peaceful dream. It was the release of a life's worth of waiting, the silent final period at the end of a long and heartbreakingly beautiful sentence. The faint rhythm of his heart, which had beaten so faithfully for so long, fluttered once, twice, and then was still. The small grey body on the doormat became perfectly, peacefully unmoving. The light of his life, the small, stubborn flame he had guarded for so many years, did not flicker and die. It simply detached from his weary body and floated free, merging with the love that had called it home. His eyes, which had watched the same road for more than a decade, remained closed. The long watch was over. The loyal soldier was relieved of his post. The waiting was finally, mercifully done. Shadow was gone, leaving behind only the silent, sleeping shell of the cat who had waited for her until his very last breath. He waited. In those two words lies his story. Shadow knew only loyalty and love, a promise whispered by a girl with tears in her eyes. Through cold winters, hot summers, and the slow passing of years, he waited. His love was a quiet vigil, a promise kept even when she was gone. In the end, love returned, not in the world, but where true love resides. Shadow's story does not end with his last breath on the weathered doormat. His silent vigil became a lesson in love and loyalty, a living poem written on the canvas of time. Through seasons and solitude he waited, an anchor in a world of change. His devotion was quiet, but vast as any ocean. Shadow's tale is an echo, a thread of light connecting hearts, reminding us that true love endures, even in silence. Shadow's legacy is unwavering loyalty, a rare gift in our fast-paced world. While we're taught to move on, Shadow held on, making his love a constant, undeniable presence. His story reminds us that true loyalty is a conscious choice, a daily act of love that endures even when it hurts. Shadow's devotion is a quiet, powerful testament to the hope that such love exists. Shadow's story is a meditation on love, pure, unwavering, and quietly steadfast. His devotion was not transactional, but a self-sustaining flame fueled by memory and hope. Even in loneliness, he reminds us, love is not something you have, but something you do. Shadow becomes a symbol of the love that remains.